ET contact is on the rise now. And now it's time to hear this panel of experiencers and researchers expressing why this is happening and what the ETs plan for the Earth. How is the future of our collective evolution being pushed forward by this higher level of consciousness? Now's the time for making contact. This panel of experts will inspire, enlighten, and motivate people to participate and know we are citizens of the greater cosmos. On it is going to be Darryl Anka, best known for his trans channeling of Bashar, the most well-known channeler in the country, and a multidimensional being, a friend from the future. Grant Cameron became involved in ufology in May 1975 with personal sightings of UFO that became known as Charlie Red Star. Carolyn Corey is producer, writer, and director of such cutting-edge films as ET Contact, exploring how ET encounters may be evidence of a greater phenomenon, which includes the hybridization of new species.
And actually, we might have a special guest appearance from Danny Sheehan. So Danny Sheehan, if people have been following it, is the lawyer for Luis Alessandro, but he wants to start a People's Diplomacy Initiative. So I thought the best way to do that is to talk to some of the people who have been in contact.
Alan Steinfeld, he has a cable TV show. Alan has been doing investigative reporting on UFOs for quite a couple of years now. So he just wrote the most amazing book. It's a bestseller on ET contacts. It's going to bring us to the panel.
Thank you all for being here. I have just written this book, Making Contact, where Darryl Anka has a prime chapter because I feel we're really going to be making contact. We need to talk to the people who are making contact. That's why, Darryl, it's 38 years with your relationship with Bashar. Is that right, Darryl?
Yes, that's correct.
So for everyone who's watching now, and thanks to Mark for producing this, we are in a new phase of contact, the contact experience. Not that it's different for people who've had contact, but for the rest of the world, they're coming online. I want to ask Darryl, this is a new time for human beings and the relationship and the upcoming release of information. What do you feel is shifting on the planet based on your relationship?
Yeah, Bashar has talked about that a little bit, and actually he's going to talk about it more in the upcoming event that we're doing in July that he's actually titled Breaking News. But he has mentioned this, that what we're seeing now on a lot of the major news networks about their discussions and release of the information from the Navy and other military institutions about some of the sightings that they're now validating, is he has said this is the early stages of disclosure, but he said to pay attention to how different people are using this information. Some of them will be using the idea that ETs exist or that these UFOs are authentic in a positive way, and some of them might be using it in a negative way. So he's just basically saying to make sure that even though we are now receiving some authentic information, just to, use your common sense and take the information with a grain of salt with regard to what people are actually going to be saying about why these ETs or these UFOs are here. Because he's basically saying focus on the idea that this is a positive event. Don't focus on the idea that people might be using this to manipulate, to control, or scare, or make people afraid of what's going on. So he said we just have to stay balanced and stay in the center with all this information that is coming out and more information that will be coming out in the near future.
What would you suggest to someone creating an organization that was going to establish relationships on the behalf of the people of planet Earth?
Well, I would suggest what basically Bashar suggests, which is, people have a certain state of being about them based on what they strongly believe to be true about themselves in life. And his suggestion is to really get a handle on letting go of our fear-based beliefs, letting go of negativity, of really putting ourselves out there and taking actions that are positive actions. Because to Bashar, the language of physical reality isn't words, it's behavior, it's action. So the things that we do that are positively oriented toward the idea of being open to realizing that we're not alone, to realizing that there are others in the cosmos that are interested in forming a connection with us. Our side of the work is to raise our own vibrations and make ourselves more equal, in a sense, vibrationally more compatible with beings that may be somewhat more advanced than us on certain levels. And so it really takes a lot of working on ourselves and promoting information that allow people to be themselves, to follow their paths, to follow their passions in life, to be true to themselves, to communicate clearly about what kind of a world we really prefer to have, and to take the necessary actions to create that world so that the ETs can see that we're not just giving it lip service, that we truly are taking the actions necessary to make the world what it can be and what the ETs can help us make the world. But we're the ones that really have to start taking the initiatives and the actions to show them, to demonstrate to them that this is something that we really truly prefer our world to be, is to be open this way and to make connections and to better ourselves and uplift ourselves and to become part of a larger family in the cosmos.
I just introduced Carolyn Cory, who's just a movie called
Terror in the Sky, but more the science and the investigation as opposed to cover-ups and stuff like that. So I really encourage everybody to watch that movie. My movie is Superhuman, The Invisible Made Visible. It's about mind over matter, consciousness, how it all works.
Carolyn Cory, going contact since she was 5 years old. So if you were to create a people's platform initiative, how would you want to structure something like that, Carolyn?
It's important, first of all, to maybe allow people to share their experiences. As you were saying, I started having experiences since I was 5, and I'm not a typical experiencer in the sense that I wasn't like abducted or things like that, or I didn't just meet grays and that's it. I had a range of different types of beings appear, communicate with me, all kinds of different types of encounters. And so I think it's important to expand the parameters of what we think contact is. That's the first thing. So if we can allow more people to talk about different types of not just beings, but experiences, I think this will also evolve the conversation to a new level. So, because I think it's right now, it's only like, we're abducted by a gray, we see 3, scary, So I think that is very important to evolve it to the next level of what the experience looks like, who the beings are. Yesterday I was talking to Grant on his podcast. There's a whole range of beings that nobody talks about, and so because the more we allow those types of conversations and added information, the more the picture starts to change. We're not just focused on, like it's us against them and they have a better technology and that's that. There's so much more to the topic of experience and the experiencer than we think is what's been publicized or talked about so far. So to me, that is a very, very, very important, huge aspect of what should be taking place. And to begin to incorporate the mechanism, because again, what are we doing here? We're trying to understand who we are. We think we want to understand who they are, what they're doing, what their agenda is, but we're asking these questions to figure out who we are. And so that's the reason why we need to, first of all, expand that picture, like I said, but start to talk about the mechanism that takes place in our consciousness to be able to be abducted or to tap into this or to download that or whatever. That also starts to bring a little bit of the science. It makes the whole topic, I want to say fuller, you know what I mean? More substantial, more real, and I think more relatable. because then you would also be attracting more of the mainstream person who thinks that, oh, they've, this is like for some few people who saw a UFO in the sky, whatever. It's just a few people who can do this or whatever. That's not for me. I don't agree. Now through my movie, Alan, every day I get dozens and dozens of emails from people, all kinds of people, judges, mayors, lawyers, medical doctors, people who had nothing to do with new age stuff or alternative stuff or UFO stuff, who tell me, just by watching your movie, I realized that I've had some sort of experience. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure how it is. So that's the reason why I think we need to introduce the bigger concept of consciousness and the mechanism, and perhaps even the spiritual aspect, not religious, so that more people are interested in this conversation and make it more normal. I'm kind of tired of being called paranormal. What is paranormal? Maybe we are the normal. So that's what I mean. I think it needs to be more substantial and bring those additional components. That would be my input.
Well, the last few years, they portrayed the aliens as a negative being. Something, right. When we were younger, we were supposed to be scared of aliens because they were the horror movies. But I think people's viewpoints are changing. I mean, they have changed.
Yes.
I think the people are ready, and the government just isn't letting us be ready.
Yeah, well, this is the point. I agree with everyone with what you've all said. And I think the idea you just brought up, Mark, is, those scary alien movies are really just us projecting our fears onto them. We're just using them, to reflect that. And I agree with what Carolyn is saying. We need to have a lot more understanding of the different types of interactions that are going on with the different types of beings, that it's a broad spectrum. It's not just one or two types. We do have a tendency to kind of lump them all into one group and just think that they all think the same and all approach this the same, and they don't. There's quite a wide variety of approaches going on, as far as I can see. And what Sinead said is important too, because I think it's really what I touched on earlier about the idea of really getting in touch with our own fear-based beliefs and letting them go. We just need to be far more transparent with ourselves so that we can really show other beings who we really are instead of hiding ourselves because we're afraid. So it's like, in many of the events we've done and the channelings we've done, and the reason that we made the documentary First Contact about the channeling that I do and about who Bashar is because of what you said, Caroline. We want to kind of bring some of this into the scientific realm. So, one of the things we did was to show that when I did a channeling state, I had my head wired to an EEG machine to see what's going on in the brain during a channeling state. And what we really discovered is that everyone has this ability. It's not a foreign ability. We're all naturally capable of achieving these different altered states in our brain that represent a higher function and a way to connect to ourselves and to others more deeply. It's just basically the gamma state, which between 40 and 100 cycles per second in the brain. So that was one of the things we did in the documentaries, because we wanted to demystify this stuff. And like you said, none of this is really supernatural. It's just nature we don't understand yet. And we're trying to, quantify that slowly over time. But we wanted to just show that everyone has the ability to get into the proper state to be more of themselves, and to really just put our true selves out there so that we are more transparent and not hiding in this compartmentalized way we tend to think, so that we don't even know, like you said, who we are. I think it's really important to become far more transparent.
Well, the government isn't even transparent. This over there, the leaders, how do we expect? Well, maybe we are, because we're in the...
Right, but that's the issue to me, is we, in a sense, really, we are the government. In other words, if we're going to keep people in there who are not willing to reflect what the people themselves are saying they prefer, then we have to take the actions to do something about changing that, because we are the government. And Bashar has often said, look, it's not a surprise that we're staying at arm's length, because you talk about, look at all the strife going on, look at the wars that are going on, look at all the fear that's on the planet. So it's up to us to really create the kind of world that we really say we prefer, and to take the actions to do so peacefully, lovingly, but not backing down, not standing down. So, the idea really is, as Bashar often says, look, we're not here to save you, we're not here to rescue you, it's your planet. You have to do something to let us know you want to be a part of this cosmic family. And so take those actions. You are your governments. Don't have the, as someone said, I think it was maybe Sinead or all of you, don't have the they versus us mentality even within your own society. You have to understand that everyone is acting based on their belief systems. What they've been brought up to believe is a truth for themselves, and a lot of that is fearful truth. So it's about clearing that out and getting people to know, look, there's enough for everybody. We don't have to hoard. We don't have to hide. We don't have to be afraid. We can figure this out. But we have to act like we actually are the people who live on this planet, and make a statement by our actions in a number of other ways as to who we really are and what we really prefer Earth to be. But I want to add to that is to not forget that the aliens and ETs are coming from their side as well. So in other words, the idea of, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying it has to be me, but they may have some idea also about why they're contacting all the people they're contacting about who represents humans on Earth. I don't think it's going to be just up to us to decide. It's a much larger, we the people, public kind of a thing than just we're going to have one official like we do for the typical government kind of activity. I think we should definitely move in that direction from our side, and also maybe, think a little bit more broadly about that. But I think we're going to be surprised to find out that it's not necessarily going to be just up to us to figure out how those interactions will happen, because I think we're already seeing that by how they're contacting people, they're already showing us to some degree their side of how first contact will also happen. Because in a sense, kind of as Bashar says, they've been doing this a lot longer with other civilizations than we have. So they kind of know what needs to happen. And so I want to just not shut out the idea that we shouldn't be looking for their cues to us as well as to how they think an actual meeting and first contact, open contact, would actually occur. I think it might be a little broader than we think.
Right. Is that true? You get that too, Carolyn, that, from your contact experience, that you've, as you're downloading this ET connection, that they have a plan of how they're proceeding that, maybe we're not even in touch with at this point?
To me, I feel like it's a much, much bigger story. I mean, from that perspective, I call it the divine plan. In fact, I wrote the book, The Divine Plan, because from that perspective, it is so much bigger and it's multidimensional. From our little perspective, we're waiting for one guy to come to the podium and tell us, yes, believe in even aliens. Yes, we did catch we do have an alien body. Roswell was real, blah, blah, blah. We're waiting for this tiny little one guy to validate something that is enormous, something that has been happening for eons on this planet and is still happening so multidimensionally through all these different beings, through all these different things, through all these different experiences. And so that's the problem. So Darryl, I totally agree with you. Also, we are so programmed to fail. Like the human, I work with, like deprogramming and regression and all kinds of stuff with hundreds of people. So the kind of like the default setting of the human brain is, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I don't know who I am, therefore I need to look for answers outside myself. I mean, that is at the root of all our problems. We rely on big pharma to heal us. We rely on government to validate what we should believe in. We rely on all kinds of authority figures outside of us to tell us who we are. And that is at the core of and here we are doing it again. We're waiting for the one guy to tell me, yes, you're right, you did have an experience. I don't need that. I know it's real. And so I agree with Darryl big time. So I think it is very, very important to have people like Daniel Sheehan. Oh my God, he is a real hero. He is such a huge hero to be out there. To me, it's not so much to get the one guy to tell us the truth. What he's doing is triggering the principle of truth in government. That's what he's doing. And so he just wants people like him, wants the people who represent us, we the people, to speak the truth. So, so that's why I think he's crucially important in that process of bringing truth. But at the same time, we need to be out there, like I said, and valid, just keep talking, just keep exploring, and stop waiting for someone outside ourselves to speak up. And when we do that, so to me, from their perspective, they're saying, it's already been laid out. Just be it, do it, say it. And the more you do, the ET, I don't want to call it agenda because it sounds like so, like it has a negative connotation. To me, the divine plan unfolds very, very organically, eloquently. And so that's the reason why, like you were saying, Darryl, it's really up to us to bring it out as it comes out. So all of a sudden, I'm telling you, right now, everybody's focused on this report. Everybody's focused, June, blah, 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 we're waiting for this big thing. And at the same time, I think that this is phase one. Okay. It's later. It's just that what this is really going to do, it's going to confuse us even more because one guy is going to say this, and this is non-conclusive, and this is classified, blah, blah, blah. But what it is going to do, it is going to trigger more confidence in the people who are having experiences, who they're going to be like, wait, Congress is talking about it. Why can't I talk about it? So that is, to me, the second phase where more and more and more people are going to be comfortable talking about these types of things. It's going to be global. And it's going to be this one guy, the ET is going to show up, but not through government. It's going to show up in your background, Mark, or in my background, or does that make sense?
Yep.
That's how the real disclosure is going to happen.
Isn't it exciting, Darryl, and everyone here and everyone watching, that we are closer than ever to this thing blossoming, right?
The whole idea behind the information that comes through in the channeling is, as Bashar has explained it, is that's one of the things they're doing to initiate contact, is sharing information to see what we do with it, to see how we respond to it. That's what tells them how ready we are to go to the next step and the next step. So things like what we're talking about here is taking those ideas of, again, self-empowerment, transparency, and all that, and putting it into action, which is what they're kind of looking for. But they are already taking the steps. The fact that they're giving us information, the fact that they're sending energy to see what we do with it, is the way they initiate, at least from Bashar civilization, is the way they initiate the whole contact process. So they are already being very active in their own way. They're waiting to see if we're going to be able to match the actions that they're taking with us, because the giving of the information is not just for the purpose of saying howdy. It's really about incorporating an understanding of how things work, how the universe is, that they understand, and they're seeing how much of it we can absorb. This, to them, is the actual way they make the initial steps of contact. If people don't absorb the information, if they don't reach out, if they don't let themselves become enlightened and transparent and positive and creative and loving, then they know that the planet and the people, at least, are not that ready. But the fact that we are talking about these things is a response to what we've already been receiving from many different beings. So I think that that's a barometer they're taking into account, so that, in a sense, they've already taken the first step, and what this proposal is all about is actually the response that they're looking for are things like this, discussions like this, platforms like this, actions that people are taking to open up the possibility of more people knowing about these things and then making a decision. I mean, what you were saying about it being something that everyone ultimately is given an opportunity to become aware of. I already consider the idea of UFOs to be the biggest secret that everyone already knows. They're just not talking about it. So it's kind of like, yes, the more we can make it okay for people to say, here's my experience, like Caroline said, that's what's really going to be the response that the ETs are kind of looking for, is this wide, broad response, along with some of these very specific platforms that can help people know it's okay to talk about this. It's not an issue of ridicule. It's not a taboo anymore. This is something that's actually truly happening, and we need to really look at it and react to it and respond to it as a part of our reality now, because it always has been. We're just now at the point where we're finally beginning to acknowledge it. But a lot of the recognition also comes from the fact that they've been giving us information, like Caroline said, for thousands of years. And we're only just kind of waking up. One thing that's always stuck with me in terms of what Bashar said is, we ask for help. We often ask for more help. He said, you are already being given all the help you can possibly be given. Nothing is being withheld from you. So when we're asking for help, what we're actually asking for is to become more aware of the help we're already receiving. That's what the awakening is to be aware of what's really going on, not to think that it has to start. It's been going on. We have to catch up and be open to the fact that we are able to now recognize this has been happening, and then discuss these things and what do we want to do about what we now are becoming aware of.
Because I've had direct experiences myself since I was 5. So nobody taught me at the age of 5 how to communicate telepathically. And so, that stayed with me. And then, communicating and connecting with other types of beings and seeing things, people's consciousness, and kind of discerning what's going to happen the next day and getting validation, stuff like that. I realized that there is a mechanism. It took me 20 years actually to figure out, what is this mechanism? How do I discern? I didn't make this up. What if the alien was never there? What if it's, what if it's true? What if it's my imagination? What if it's this and that? And that's why I'm saying we have to really understand the mechanism to validate all of these experiences. So we stop saying, this is projection, we made it up, and there's an anomaly in your brain and this and that. And so that's the reason why I've been taught, not just lecturing and, teaching people, but really training all kinds of people to be able to do these things for themselves, because that's the only way the truth. Is when you have the experience. I can describe what a UFO looks like, or what a being looks like, what it looks like to come together with a being and merge and blah, 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 all you want. You can have an idea, but the minute you have the experience, your entire, on a cellular level, your whole life changes right then. So that's the reason why I've been really helping people have the experience of direct contact themselves, so that they can speak their own truth from within.
I don't think we have to think that we have to convince anybody that doesn't want to be convinced. It's just about moving forward if you find yourself with like-minded people who know what they've experienced. So it's really just about validating ourselves to move forward in the way that we prefer to. There are always probably going to be people who will not be able to validate that for themselves, and that's okay, because we're not trying to convince the world. We're just trying to demonstrate what we know as a truth, and at least allow it to exhibit itself in the way that it is possible for it to do so. So I don't necessarily want to feel stuck between those things, because I'm not out to convince anybody. I often even say, you don't have to believe that Bashar is real. I can't prove it to you. I have my own proof for myself and my own experience. And that's why we say what's important is just listen to the information and try it, because the proof comes with the information. Anytime anyone has actually used the information he's given us, they actually get their own proof that the information itself works and changes reality. So it's not about anyone believing that Bashar is real. It's about them believing in themselves and using the information to make changes in their lives that they prefer to make. That's more convincing than anything. When somebody applies the information and they get an effect in their own lives and things change for the better in a very profound way, that's the most convincing thing. Like Caroline said, or Sinead said, it's experience. They get the experience themselves that, okay, well, since the information works, at least then it tips their mind like, well, gee, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter whether it comes from an ET or whether it's a higher level of the channel's own consciousness or whatever. The information works. And just by letting them in on that level, normally most people will suddenly start to realize there's more going on than they thought. Because once they get into that level, you start perceiving things differently. You have to, as Bashar says, this is really just physics. You cannot perceive what you're not the vibrational level of. So if you change your vibrational level, you do start perceiving that other things are going on. So in that sense, it sort of takes care of itself. And it's not really about having to worry about convincing anyone. Everyone has to be allowed to believe what they want to believe so that we can be allowed to believe and know what we need to believe and know as well. Going back to what I told you earlier about the fact that we did an EEG reading when I was in a channeling state, they found out that when Bashar was talking, the energy state was very high, but the energy state went higher when he was listening.
Let me just get Danny into the conversation because he is the guy going to Washington, representing, in a sense, the people and pushing the UFO question forward.
I was legal counsel for the Disclosure Project back in 2001. I was legal counsel for Stephen Bassett's Citizens Commission to vet the different witnesses that would be presented to the Congress. You know, I've brought high-ranking military officers to their congressmen and senators to present their direct knowledge about this and try to get them to respond to it.
Coach, what's your strategy going to Washington and talking about this?
Well, a lot of it is to try to have diplomatic relationships between the UFO community and our government to begin with. I mean, the formal structures of the United States government have been for 75 years in this posture that this just isn't true. And that if anybody tries to say that it's true, they're going to be excoriated and attacked and discredited. And now for the first time, they are being pushed into a situation where they have to at least pretend to be, quote, evaluating it, as distinct from investigating. They haven't admitted they're going to investigate it yet. They're just evaluating it. So what I'm trying to do is establish diplomatic relationships with the people inside the United States government who are in the process of trying to figure out what to do about this right now. They feel that they've been pressed by Lou Elizondo and by Chris Mellon, particularly, having revealed these videos. I've never been convinced that the best policy is to be trying to get the people who are hiding the information to reveal the information. As you've been talking about, I think that obviously the best evidence from a strictly lawyer point of view is to have you have the experience yourself.
Right.
And I was directly involved in the citizen diplomacy program of reaching out to Gorbachev back when he was just Secretary of Agriculture in the Soviet Union, setting up a diplomatic communication between him as a citizen and our citizens to try to persuade him to undertake glasnost and perestroika, which he did. In my staff person, I was chief counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in their National Social Ministry Office, their public policy office. And my staff person ended up becoming the president of the Gorbachev Foundation. And the Gorbachev Foundation set up a whole series of meetings with former presidents and secretaries of state and secretaries of defense to try to discuss having a new, more modern paradigm, a new, more modern worldview. And we discussed in some of those meetings the implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization and extraterrestrial beings. That whole process was underway when 9/11 occurred. And so that I'm a great believer in citizen diplomacy. I'm a great believer in trying to kind of get out around the institutional structures of a national security state that insists upon perceiving the ET phenomenon strictly in terms of whether they're a threat to our national security or whether they're violating our airspace or whatever the other panoply of sources of anxiety they have.
So,
So
no, but how close are you to saying, guess what? There are people having contact, that they're here, that they're intelligent, they're here to help. I mean,
well, it's interesting. The latest lengthy interview that we did, I participated in with Lou Elizondo, whom, as you probably know, was the head. He was the executive director
right.
of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Project in the Pentagon. The latest lengthy interviews I've had, for example, with the Associated Press with Lou, the key is getting Lou to tell what it is that he believes, to really get him to utilize his stature and status as the person who ran the investigations to come forward to the people and talk to the people about it. So what we're trying to do is trying to figure out the parameters inside the Defense Department right now, what the protocols are with regard to being able to talk about this, because we're hoping to get Lou and Chris Mellon and other people that have been inside these programs to be able to come forward and share their own judgments about this at this point. And in the latest interviews, which have not been public yet, but that Lou has been emphatic about the fact that he has in intelligence language a high degree of confidence that these vehicles are not Russian and are not Chinese. And that may seem, to people who've had the direct experience and who are channeling extraterrestrials, et cetera, that may seem an awful long ways from the ball. Right. Of just saying they're not Russian, they're not Chinese. But it's extraordinarily important to marry that particular position with the assertion on the part of the United States Defense Department that these are real vehicles, and the statements being made allegedly in the report that's coming up, that they're not ours, that these are not our technologies. So if they're not our technologies, and they're not Russian, they're not Chinese, then the question gets posed is, well, what are they? And when you can get people from inside the government structure starting to articulate what it is they have been talking about inside government circles about what these beings may be, and you start hearing them talk about the options being extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or some extraordinarily sophisticated aspect of the human species that live underground and have come from some ancient time, and they've lived underground for lengthy periods of time, and that they come out from under the ocean in these vehicles. To have that kind of a conversation going on inside the United States Pentagon, and now have in interviews with the Associated Press and in the New York Times, et cetera, is in fact a substantial advance for people who've been having the experience, like yourselves, who've been attempting to try to communicate to people the importance of these kind of experiences. So that there's this extraordinarily fluid time going on right now, pursuant to which there's a whole set of evaluations going on about what to be done about this experience that people are having and about this phenomenon. So it's a pretty extraordinary period.
It's an amazing time, and you're really our guy in Washington. Wouldn't you say, like, it's do you feel like pressure, or you feel excitement that you are central to this whole disclosure phenomena?
Well, I don't know. I'm not.
I've
been in these places a lot. That I represented the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case to publish all 47 volumes of the classified reports. I was, after the Bailey's office, we represented James McCord, who was the lead wiretapper for the Watergate burglary, who wrote the letter to Judge Sirica blowing the whistle on Nixon. So you get sort of used to these things in a certain sense. But in this particular case, that Lou Elizondo asked me to be his legal counsel, knowing that I was legal counsel to the Disclosure Project,
right?
Knowing that I was legal counsel to the Citizens Commission on ETs and extraterrestrial life, and he knew that in fact I was the one that worked with the New York Times to expose these alleged national security top secret thing. Right. So he knew that in coming to me. So that there's this dynamic that's involved in my relationship with him that has to do with lifting up this information. and getting it out to the people of the world.
Do you think you can push it enough so there'll be congressional hearings about this if the Elizondo case gets out there?
Yeah, but I mean, I've also had a lot of experience with congressional hearings. I mean, congressional hearings are seldom real. You know, there are always these dog and pony shows. They've already gotten figured out what the questions are going to be. They've already had to submit their written answers or else they wouldn't get to testify. You know, there's a whole set of choreographing going on, you know, with people in both political parties kind of jockeying for time. You know, it's not the be all and end all. But on the other hand, in the same way that people got much more responsive to this issue after the New York Times said that it was true, and even more people got involved when 60 Minutes said that it's true. So if you can get the United States congressional committees and have C-SPAN broadcasting it around the country, and people, especially in the summertime, you know, we like to have these exciting Watergate trials, the Senate Intelligence Committee trials with Frank Church. We would like to have the Iran-Contra committee hearings. You know, this can be summer fare. And if we can get that to happen, where there's a lot of congressional hearings going on, especially if the Congress people are not really in control of the process. They very seldom ever agree to allow their instrumentalities to be utilized to actually investigate anything or to run any risk whatsoever that information is going to be coming out to the American people that isn't to their personal benefit politically. And so that we'll see.
But something's possible. I just want to ask Grant.
As soon as I heard Danny Sheehan was a lawyer, I said we can actually win this thing. I mean, this is like it's almost unraveling like a Hollywood script, where I think what's going to happen is they're going to come out and say, we've got so many sightings. We don't know this is alien, and the roof is going to blow off. I mean, it's just going to go crazy. Even Bloomberg called it a couple days ago, or Blumenthal called it a feeding frenzy. When you get the New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, all these papers feeding on this thing, and he said he couldn't even do a story now if he tried, because they won't let him in, because all these top reporters are now using their sources. And what's going to happen is you're going to get past the thing where they're going to say, okay, it's for real. And then everybody's going to say, okay, what's going on? Who are they? Where are they coming from? And the pressure is going to be immense. And that's where I see like Danny Sheehan coming in, and we've never had anybody on the inside that has any power. We've always been, you take what you get. They tell you to get lost, you get lost. Unless you got a lawyer, you can't sue them or whatever. We've got this guy on the inside who is like the ultimate guy that takes on everybody. I just fear for the guys that have got to take on Danny Sheehan.
Oh, he's the big gun.
Grant, do you have a question for Danny? Because he's going to Washington on Wednesday to have a meeting with the Inspector General.
To give us an idea of how many investigations are being held, and because it's not just the one, right? There's Lou Elizondo has a 60-page. And the other question I had is, are you the main person? Because I'm sure Lou Elizondo wouldn't have been able to file his 60-page thing without you. Are you the main guy that's sort of setting stuff up? And how many investigations are there in terms of what you want to?
I can say that Lou and I worked together on his complaint that he was filing. And there are about 4 different divisions or subdivisions inside the Inspector General's office that are actively involved in what they are framing as evaluations. And that there's the one that was in direct response to Lou, that they had an initial response from the whistleblower retaliation subdivision. Then there was a second one that contacted him because some of the actions that were taken against him were after he was employed. And so that it wasn't technically inside the jurisdiction of the whistleblowers, because you had to still be employed to be filing your complaint. There was another one that we're going to be meeting with on Wednesday, which is the space, missiles, and nuclear division. And then there's the one that issued the May 3rd memo, the very same day that Lou filed his complaint. Another division, which is a space intelligence division, issued a memo saying that they were going to be undertaking an evaluation to actually determine or to evaluate the degree of activities that have been undertaken by the Defense Department relating to the UAP phenomenon. That's much broader. And they actually felt compelled on the face of the memo to say, and we may expand the actual scope of our evaluation as the process goes on. And they began to elucidate what some of the military units are that they were going to be investigating or evaluating. And they also said that they may expand that to include additional ones, so that what you've got there, you got 4 different sub-agencies inside the Inspector General's office, all engaged in some type of, quote, evaluation process about the UAP phenomenon. What I've said a number of times is that whatever it is they're going to do is going to be completely dependent upon what the American people and the press do. If the American people start getting really interested in this and demanding that they look into this more, and the press are pressing on them to find out what they're doing, are they going to stage a real investigation about this? The more of that goes on, the broader they're going to go. But as of right now, I've laughed about it. I've actually said it a couple of times. I said it to Blumenthal, Ralph Blumenthal, of the New York Times the other day when he and I were talking. I said, that it reminds me very much of the movie Chinatown, where in Chinatown, Jake Gittes, who's Jack Nicholson character, is asked by Evelyn Mulwray, the Faye Dunaway character. She said, well, what did you do before you became a private investigator? And he said, I was a detective for the Los Angeles Police Department assigned to Chinatown. And she said, well, what did you do? And he said, as little as possible. He said, as little as possible. And she said, well, why is that? He said, well, because you couldn't always tell what was going on in Chinatown. And that's what's happening right now. I think that the various subdivisions of the Inspector General's office are trying to do as little as possible because they can't tell what's going on inside the Defense Department. They can't tell whether the protocols have changed. They can't tell what it is they really ever knew about. They can't tell whether they know about anything or nothing. They don't know what's going on here. And they don't want to be the ones that push to find out, because historically, anybody who's been pushing to find out what's been going on inside the United States government about the UFO issue has been excoriated, and their careers have been destroyed. So that they're still operating under the old paradigm of, please don't say anything about this. We would have Navy pilots who were surrounded by these things, flying all around them and going at like 43,000 miles an hour everywhere, and they didn't even dare report it because they knew from all of their friends, if you ever try to report this, the first thing that happens is you get sent to get a psychiatric exam. And they used to send it to John Mack, who I also represented about this issue. So that's we don't know yet.
Will we ever know who that person is or organization that's been suppressing this since 47, and will we get back to 47 in these hearings?
I'm planning on finding out.
Right.
Yeah.
You're planning, but that means tracing it back to the whole Roswell or before even.
Yes, it does.
And is there really a trail that leads back there?
There's always the trail.
There is.
There's always a trail. The question is being able to track it.
Can I ask a personal question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Danny, you started out, you wanted to be an astronaut. Is this going to be the highlight of your career in terms of where you are right now? Have you always waited for something like this?
Well, I've always been assuming that this time would come when we would actually get to this investigation, because what's necessary is to have an adequate base from which to do an investigation, that there's adequate forums that are going to be listening, that there's adequate news coverage that's being covered, there's an adequate interest on the part of the American people. You have to have all of these things functioning before you can actually engage in a case or an investigation that's going to bring about significant change. And so this one has been broiling for some time, for 75 years now. I was 2 years old when Roswell happened. So, and I wasn't paying much attention to it at the time, but it didn't take me long to find out about it. As soon as I discovered what stars were, and I realized, whoa, look at this. There's all these other star systems with suns and planets going around them. I mean, this is really foolish what we're doing down here to each other. Doesn't somebody have a little higher perspective on what's going on? So I'm delighted to
know if Darryl had anything he would like.
I just wanted to say, first of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, Dan. And I'm speaking for myself, but I think I'm probably speaking on behalf of all of us when I say I really deeply appreciate your efforts on behalf of this whole subject, and anything that gets anyone talking about this more, I think is really important. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely.
Carol and Cory is also. But is there anything you think you would want to tell Danny to say to the guys in Washington, based on your perspective, Darryl or Carol? I mean, because you have this 38-year relationship with these beings, and so you're sort of a bridge.
Well, the only thing I can think of at the moment is the old chestnut of scientists saying, look, aliens are very alien, and we don't really know how they think, but we know exactly how they're going to communicate with us. And yet when you give them something that's outside the box, they say, no, that's not right. We know exactly. It's going to be by radio. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. I would just suggest the idea in some way, shape, or form is just to be open to being aware that there may be more avenues for contact than we think. And just to be aware that those avenues may actually be more prominent for them than they are for us. So just that idea going along. It's not even anything you necessarily have to say to anyone, but just the idea that it's not necessarily going to come over the radio. It's not necessarily going to be the sci-fi scenario. And that way they can sort of be maybe more open to looking around and seeing what might actually represent other forms of communication. That's my only suggestion.
Right, thank you. It has to be all out on the table so we can actually look at it together from a scientific, psychological, sociological, technological point of view. Is that your vision, Danny, and for the future of this discussion?
We'll see. I think that the institute that we're talking about, given the access to technology now, of being able to have something like the observation deck campus, where they have different little colleges, basically. People have their own little rooms and workshops and avatars, and you can go into the conference room together and have that. From a technological point of view, we can have a repository to bring information into a single place. Where the differing UFO groups and individual researchers, et cetera, can each set up their little shops and start presenting this stuff in some sort of a comprehensive way. That we have a physical facility up in Clear Lake, just 100 miles north of San Francisco, where there's a physical facility, perhaps down the road sometime. Once the constituencies get built up. And there's adequate interest in having physical gatherings about these things, but at the outset, to work with the kind of technologies that are available and start getting the information into one centralized place, where a lot of the people in the country, as they start to become more and more interested in being, quote, allowed, being authorized to look into this subject, where there can be a place, like, for example, Jordy Peace, who has the Rogue Metaphysical Library up in Ashland, Oregon. He's got access there to almost every interview that's ever been conducted, every conference, every kind of interview, every book that's been written, and if we can get them up online and funnel them through something like the observation deck, to have the Rogue Metaphysical Library there, put it up online so people can actually get access to that information themselves, so that we can generate a dynamic within the American public and in the world where people are really anxious to find out about this, where they really want to, where each of your experiences, where you can be interviewed about them, like you probably already have been bunches of times, but be interviewed about them and set forth your story in a totally credible way, so people can get access to it there. Because a lot of the people who come from, a position of not knowing a lot about this, they would say, holy mackerel, I listened to this one woman and she was so credible. She didn't have antenna, or tinfoil hats or anything. And was talking about having these experiences. I believed her. And that's how people are going to get moved. It is true. It is true that the one major thing that can move people is a direct experience themselves.
Right.
But there's going to be people who are going to come and volunteer for the diplomat program to be adequately trained. There's going to require discipline, study. You can't just say, oh, here, you're volunteering to go meet with the UFO people. Here, let's get you up on a ship and talk to them. We've got to be a little more circumspect than that.
No, but what about rolling out in Congress? Eric Davis in the July 24th New York Times 2012 said, yeah, he briefed members of Congress on crash retrievals. Well, that's the time saying that. Are we close to any of that? Because it's already been out in the paper.
We've got to make this as exciting as a World Series, or as the next chapter of Game of Thrones.
Right.
You have to get people interested and excited about wanting to know about this. It's an exciting subject.
Well, Grant says it's the Super Bowl of all stories. So thank you so much for everything.
Yes.
You are our guy in Washington, Danny.
Guy in Washington.
No, really,
All right.
you're speaking for the American people. All of us who've been at this for so long.
I'll do my very best.
Well, you will.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone because I actually need to go as well. But it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for the platform. And it was a pleasure to meet every single one of you. This is wonderful. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Now the witnesses, like the Nimitz witnesses and all this kind of stuff, but you wait until they get like Danny Sheehan going on Fox and stuff. They're going to be following Danny Sheehan around like, this is the guy, and he did this and he did that. He shut down the nuclear industry, and this is they haven't found Danny Sheehan yet. But to me, as soon as I heard Danny Sheehan was involved, I said, man, we could actually win this thing, because Danny isn't going to give up. Danny knows.
When you say win this thing, though, Grant, what does that look like, winning this thing? What do you mean?
Well, it's going to spiral. I say that the beginning is only starting. As soon as they say, yeah, this is for real, and start playing, the two-step and trying to walk around it, that's when everybody is going to realize this thing's for real. And I said this many years ago already. Once the major media realizes they've been had, it's game over, because it's going to be like Watergate. It's going to be like, everybody put your top reporters on this, dig as hard as you can, and it's going to all start to unravel really, really fast. And that's what it comes down to. The more pressure they're under, the more it's going to unravel, the faster it's going to move. I think this thing is going to move really, really fast starting at the end of this month.
It is unraveling, because the news even Tucker Carlson, who I never really liked, but he's coming out to, you mean we've been lied to? He said that right out there. So I think a lot of the newscasters will say, look, the government is saying there's no such thing as UFOs, and suddenly you're telling us there is? Yeah. What's going on? Who do we believe? And so Grant is someone, Mark, and everyone who has knows where all the moving pieces in this thing is. He's tracked every U.S. president and their relationship to the UFO phenomena. So Grant, how will it play out if Danny gets his way in Washington? What do you see unfolding now?
Well, I think it's going to be more the media, but the media is going to just start scooping this, scooping that. More and more pieces are going to come out. They're going to be under more pressure to release more stuff. And this is like the new Trump story. I mean, everybody's been looking for a replacement for the Donald Trump story. This is going to be it. I think this is going to go viral. I really do, because they're going to first make their statement and everybody thinks they're going to walk away. This is just going to light the fire. If they say, yeah, this is real, but we're not saying it's alien, everybody's
already said it's real.
Yeah,
they have said that.
But I mean, officially, where they stand up and officially say it, like if they are forced to do a news conference. I've heard that Biden has given authorization to NASA to speak. I mean, it's just taking off. It's just and you know what these stories are like. Once it goes viral in the media, it goes viral and it just starts to accelerate and accelerate. And this is a story they've all been waiting for. And Danny Sheehan is the ideal guy.
That's why we need to be prepared. That's why I wrote my book, Preparations for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence, because people are going to be upended. They're going to suddenly, their reality is not going to be what they thought it is. And it's going to upset a lot of people, especially the fundamentalists, the right, all those people, or whatever angle they're at. But the world is not what we've been told it is. And that's upsetting. That's just, and it's also exciting. So,
and I say it's going to be upsetting to the scientists as well, when scientists suddenly realize it's not a random, meaningless universe. And if you get into the thing with multi-dimensions, then where do you go with the Big Bang and with a big explosion with all these nuts and bolts banging into each other? And suddenly you're talking about multi-dimensional world and ultra terrestrials, you might as well say they're coming from heaven. I mean, the stories are just going to be unbelievable, and people know the amount of people that will follow this. This is like a rating bonanza. They used to use it to push up the ratings. I mean, everybody, I can predict this is going to be absolutely viral. Right now, they're playing the game of briefing the armed services and intelligence, which means weapons. But I said, why didn't they brief the Science and Technology Committee? Because Bush said to Carter, he said, if you want the answers to this, if you want the records for the people, you should go to the House Science and Technology Committee. So even Lou Elizondo made a statement later after that said, well, maybe if this thing opens up, we go into science and technology. And Danny Sheehan has a degree in divinity. I mean, that was how he started. He was brought in by the Carter administration by Marcia Smith to give a lecture to the top 50 scientists at JPL on the religious implications of this discovery of extraterrestrial life. This thing is just starting. I mean, and it'll go spiral and people will pick up this angle and this angle. I can just see this is going to be absolute, like a bomb going off. But what you need that statement. Say, okay, this is real, but we're not going to talk about the rest. That's exactly what the media wants to hear. And then somebody's going to break a story, another story. I heard Fox is doing a big 60-minute thing. They're all jumping on the thing. And that's what Ralph Blumenthal said is all some feeding frenzy with the top reporters now to try to break the story, because this is Pulitzer Prize stuff. And the whole house of cards, I think, is about to collapse.
The goal is disclosure.
But there's still a point above, because that's what everybody wants. Everybody says, when's disclosure coming? And it's like, what do you mean by disclosure? Oh, they got to tell us the truth. We're not alone. I mean, we've known that for a while. It's beyond that story, because what's going to happen next is not just the idea we're not alone. It's the whole paranormal thing. It's when you start talking to the experiencers, or where Sinead and I do an interview with 3 people who say the world is completely perfect. One's a near-death experience person. One's a person who's just sitting in a chair. One's in a float tank. This whole paranormal thing about how does the world work, this spiritual thing is going to start, especially when you get into the whole idea, this may not be ET. And Lou Elizondo's gone there, and Kit Green has gone there. And there's, the Politico reporter, national security reporter, said there was an investigation done by the Defense Department. Nobody's picked it up yet. He said it, by the Defense Department, to look at whether this is here now in this dimension right here. We can't see them. So when you get into that whole thing, the whole idea of how does reality work starts to come into thing. Forget about where we're alone. That's just the starting point. It's all this other stuff. Suddenly this spiritual thing, that's like almost the idea is you better buy a suit and tie because it's time to go back to church. It's almost that kind of thing, that there's another aspect to this thing other than just the fact that we're not alone. It's all, what's all this rest of this weird stuff, and where are they from? And that's where I think it really gets exciting. Darryl Anka with Bashar, where people start looking at that and taking it more serious. And that's where the answers are going to be, because I don't believe the answers are in the government. They're never going to tell you. They're always going to have some guy try to get a patent or national security or whatever. It's the experiencers on the street. When you start talking to them and they start becoming on camera and they start telling you what's actually going on and the contacts that are being made, that's when it really takes off, because then it moves out of this whole idea about let's just get the aliens and shoot them and get their technology and we'll have, better cars and more cheaper energy and stuff like that. It's way beyond just this simple physical thing that we have aliens or wherever that's coming. It's this whole other aspect of the spiritual and the idea that we can actually interact with this. And there are people that are interacting with this phenomena and they can tell you what's actually going on, whereas the government will not tell you what's going on.
Well, that's why Carol and Cory and Darryl Anka are here. But the other thing that Grant just said that it's kind of like shocked me or woke me up. These may not be aliens. We're calling something aliens, but that's just the name we give to this phenomena that we can't describe. So let's call it aliens. But it might not be aliens at all. I said to Grant, you can't tell me they're not aliens. I just wrote a book about it. It's aliens.
But you see a lot of them doing that. Let's remember when Reed said, do not call them little green men. I don't want to go little green men. When Leslie Kean and Blumenthal wrote the book, the New York Times article, they said, we're not saying aliens. We're not saying aliens. Then Lou Elizondo says, we're not saying aliens. We're not saying. And what I hear behind that is the fact that, yes, they have bodies. Yes, they have crafts, but they aren't 100% sure where they're from, unless, because they don't have any passports from Zeta Reticuli or something like that. There's this question, I believe, in the background where they know this is a little more complex than aliens. And that's where it gets into this interdimensional thing and this multidimensional thing, which gets into a whole different aspect of the whole idea, or the way you told me. Not only have you got it wrong about how the world works, it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. You think you know, you just think you know, you haven't got a clue what's going on. That's what it seems to be indicating when they keep saying it's not alien, it's not alien, it's not alien. It means they know something beyond the alien thing. This is more complex than aliens. And that's what Jacques Vallée's always said. I'd be very surprised if this turns out to just be extraterrestrials coming. The government knows something. The people in behind know something beyond the alien thing, that this is some sort of complex thing that has to do with the nature of reality.
Oh, they've known it for a very, very long time. They've known it for a very long time.
Yeah, but Mark, doesn't that expand the whole issue that we're talking about? If we say it's not aliens, then who are we? What does this mean? What is consciousness? What is the essence of it all? This is the question I think whoever these visitors are pushing us towards.
Okay.
I think the whole thing's exciting.
As a yoga.
Well, one of the things that if you talk to experiencers, what they'll tell you is when they ask them, are you an alien? And they say, no, that would not best describe who I am, or the idea. And so what I would say is it comes down to all the world's a stage, all the men and women and aliens are about actors. They have their entrances and exits, and each man plays many roles. We are all etheric beings coming in, playing a role. And because we played King Henry VIII in a high school play doesn't mean we're King Henry VIII. We have to remember who we actually are. We're all etheric beings. They're coming into this world, becoming physical, going back. And that comes to this spiritual idea, is that when people suddenly realize that we are etheric beings playing aliens, playing humans, and that's all this big game thing, then it's this whole higher aspect that everything starts to crumble. All the reality, like MIT guys going to MIT suddenly decide, oh my God, I spent $50,000 a year for tuition, and everything I believed was wrong. And the scientific paradigms, everything starts to collapse as to what's real, what's not real. How does the world really work? And that's when we get past the point of just gathering material and realizing there's more to life than just material matter.
Well, they're just beginning to get upset by the fact that there's aliens, or what we're calling aliens. That just imagine where it will lead to places like Grant. You don't even know who we are, who you are, what our potential is. What were you going to say, Grant? You were going to say?
No, there's a couple of other things that will come up, that will emerge, but they haven't come up yet. I sort of poke the bear all the time on Twitter and Facebook, and I talk about is the U.S. Going to increase immigration if reptilians and grays decide that they want to immigrate to the United States? Can you imagine this problem of people saying, are we going to allow these people into our society? Or the idea that the United States of America is no longer the big fish, that now it's a world, almost like the one world government thing, where the world is talking and it's no longer just an American thing. There's so many more complicated things that are going to arise from this discussion, where we're going to realize, like, it's not the world we thought it was.
You know, not only just that, but the whole idea about vibration and vibrational realities. We will come out of this very simplified world into a whole new universe, a whole new possibility. And that's the exciting part. You know, we're like children walking into a new room with all these toys, and it's like we're finding out, we're going to be really educated on who we are in terms of a greater cosmology.
Yeah, I think you and I, all the people on this panel, know who we are. It's the people who don't know who are going to go, what? You mean this is all for real? Like, you and I know how it all works, right. But it's you have to have empathy for these people who haven't got a clue. They're not in the Super Bowl. They're not in the stadium. They have no idea what's going on. Where suddenly they're going, what are you talking about?